Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Monday, September 23rd, and Grace and I are here to visit with you about Baylor's heartbreaking loss to Colorado over the weekend. I'm here in Oklahoma. I actually watched the game remotely. You'll see my new backdrop. I'm outside right now as my kids are freaking out inside. But, man, let's just kind of recap this game. It's basically started off at the point Baylor's up 24-10, kind of full in control. Special teams touchdown. Offenses had a couple scores. And at that point, everything looked good. Honestly, there's most of the game, I felt like Baylor was pretty much in control. Like, yeah, Colorado had some of their big plays in moments where everything else was going right for Baylor. Colorado would pop a big play. And eventually they went on to tie it up 24-24. Baylor regains control, goes up with a touchdown pass to Hal Presley from Sawyer Robertson to go up 31-24 late in the fourth quarter. And then it was the miraculous fourth down play by Shedeur Sanders and LaJohntay Webster that sent it to overtime. And at that point, man, it just felt inevitable that Colorado was going to win that game. Goes into overtime. Colorado scores relatively easily. And then Baylor looks like there's still some life. They're driving, and Colorado's really not stopping them either. And Travis Hunter, I guess the player of the game in a lot of ways, makes the play that forces the fumble on Dominic Richardson out of the back of the end zone, and they reviewed it and didn't get in. And honestly, if they call it a touchdown, it probably stands a touchdown because I don't think they had the greatest angle to overturn it. It was close, but ultimately it was a fumble and a pretty solid overall performance by Baylor, kind of wasted. And one of those wins that they needed to get to bowl eligibility, it felt like that could be one of the ones that they get, is not there anymore. But, man, what's your initial reactions? I know we're kind of in unique places where we are talking about this game, but, man, it was pretty heartbreaking for Baylor to watch it the way it unfolded.
This was completely gut-wrenching. And I got so many text messages after the game and just reaction and just people being rightfully just kind of speechless and upset for a variety of reasons. And I know we're going to get into that. I think that, big picture, this is the craziest part about this game. There's going to be a ton of overreaction to it, and I completely understand it. It's a game that everyone feels like Baylor just kind of let slip away. And that's happened far too many times over the last 2 years, like too many times where they've allowed these opportunities to kind of get away from them. But I think if you're to look at this in a single game outlook and you're just like, okay, what happened in this game? Baylor went on the road as a road underdog, and it took a miracle for them to lose on the road against a Colorado team that I think most people feels like is probably a borderline bowl team. Not a great team, but at home, they're going to be tough to beat. They have a lot of weapons, a lot of NFL talent. And so, the goal was, I think everyone would have been happy if Baylor would have lost this game in normal circumstances by 3 points or by, a touchdown or whatever. But because of the way it happened, that's where it starts to change the conversation a little bit. And, Baylor being 3-15 against FBS opponents in their last 18, since beating Oklahoma back in 2022, not great. Not great. The only marquee win in there is an epic comeback on the road against a 6-7 UCF team in their first season in the Big 12. It just feels like this program is kind of at a point right now where it's just like, these losses continue to pile on top of each other, and these circumstances for the losses continue to pile on each other, and they have to break that trend if they want to have success this year, and if Dave Aranda wants to continue to have success during his tenure. You got to find ways to win these close games and these important marquee matchups.
Yeah, really since that 21 season, these close losses have been hard to come by. Close losses that should have potentially been wins have been hard to come by because, last year, I think they're like 2-3 in one-loss games, but 2022, they were just terrible in one loss games. And you go back to 23, obviously was not good. 22 was not good. 21 was not. It was a really good season in one score games. They won a lot of those. They just haven't been able to find it. And that could honestly, like if you just flip those numbers for the last few years since that great run to the Big 12 championship game, Sugar Bowl championship, that if you just flip those games, these one possession games have been basically what's kept them from bowl games. And that's another story in this season now is like, okay, is this going to flip the script? And I think you're right. I think you look at this in a vacuum and say, this is all we know about this game. And it was an epic game. And you learned a lot about Baylor. I would say you've learned some things about Baylor more and more. But the fact that Baylor had the control at the end of the first half and gave up a little momentum to make it 24-17, that was really tough to swallow. And then they regained the momentum at the end of the fourth quarter. And you think, dude, it's in the bag now. And it did take a miracle. And give credit to Colorado, man. Like they didn't stop fighting. They had a couple of chances. The play right before that, I guess it was, where the ball hits the receiver in the chest, that could have potentially been the touchdown to send them to overtime. And so they just made plays. And I think Colorado and Baylor, everyone knew going into this game, this was a win both teams kind of needed to get them one step closer to bowl game. It's like, which of these teams could pull it out? And it was battle tooth and nail. But in general, I think the most frustrating part, if you're a Baylor fan, is that this was a game that you had control of for a significant portion of the game. They rattled that offense. They still made plays. Don't get me wrong. Like obviously Baylor's defense has holes in it, but the pass rush, the tackling for the most part, besides on Sanders, was strong. Like they made so many plays, and then it's just giving up at the end of it. So I want to kind of get into this all now, all these kind of step-by-steps, what we learned about this Baylor team, because we can talk about the loss and what it means, et cetera. But this is truly about the game. And I want to start with the offense. It wasn't a great performance by any means. I think that we learned a lot about Colorado's defense. I think what they did in the second half against Nebraska and what they did against Colorado State and now what they did against Baylor's kind of proven they're a better defensive team than they were last year. But in general, Baylor's offense was steady. It wasn't great. It wasn't amazing. I think that they took the foot off the gas a little bit in the second quarter when they should have attacked a little bit more and tried to capitalize. You got a 24-10 lead. Let's build on this, like even a field goal. But what were your overall impressions of Sawyer Robertson in his second start of the season in the offense in general, starting with the passing game? Obviously, we saw a couple of big plays in the pass game, but then the rush offense as well. Going up, I guess, what I would consider kind of the second strength of that Colorado defense was their defensive line, their front seven, slowing down the rush game. But in general, what are your thoughts on what Baylor did offensively?
Well, I think coming into this game, a big thing that I was kind of keeping my eye on was Sawyer Robertson in the run game. And that proved to be very key for Baylor. He ends up 9 for 82 and a touchdown. Of course, I think it was 45-yard touchdown. It was a really nice run, really nice design. They got kind of fortunate that they ended up with that because I think maybe 2 plays before that, Sawyer threw one that should have been picked off. But they're able to rebound. He gets the great touchdown. Great play call, great design. Sawyer showing off the athleticism and what makes him so good in those designed QB run situations. Well, there were a few other ones in this game that did not go well. One in particular that I'm sure we'll talk about later on in this game. But I felt in general, Baylor did what they needed to do. I mean, going into this game, I said, hey, Baylor's probably going to get 150 yards rushing, and they're probably going to average around 4 yards per carry. That's what Colorado had basically been giving up all year. Baylor goes for 166, 4 yards per carry. They were solid. Yes, the 45-yard run, sure, maybe it skews things, but still, it was a solid performance. It was good enough to win on the road. Where I didn't think they were good enough was passing efficiency, and this was something we mentioned in the game that Colorado lost and the close game against North Dakota State. Both those quarterbacks completed a high number of passes, and the accuracy was in that 75% range. Sawyer was like right around 50%, and it was very much a hit the big play or it was an incompletion is what at times it kind of felt like. He made some excellent throws, some just like the throw to Hal Presley was probably the best throw Baylor quarterback has made all year because it was great coverage. He dropped in the bucket. He had a couple other ones like that, missed a few. I think he had one to Ashton Hawkins that should have been a big play for Baylor. Didn't end up happening. And so I think you put all that together, I would say Sawyer played really well in his first road start. I feel like he's going to continue to grow from this. But at the end of the day, there is another level that I think this offense needs to take in a quarterback to receiver to pass catcher type area. I didn't feel like they were open consistently enough. I didn't feel like the throws were always accurate enough. And I think part of that's being on the road. Part of that is Colorado. The other part of it is just Baylor, I think, continuing to get those reps in.
Yeah, no, for sure. You look at the total yardage, and Baylor only ended up with 314 yards, but I think a lot of that, something we talked about on the message board, I don't know if we talked about on the podcast, but on the Sick of 365 message boards, was kind of hidden yardage, and Baylor did terrific game, punt coverage, but also punt returns, kick returns. So it negated some opportunities for more yardage. So I think that looks a little more lopsided than it should be, and it kind of takes away from what Baylor did offensively, because I think it was more consistent rather than looking at the box score and saying, oh, Baylor only had 314 yards for the total game. But you have a long punt return. You have two, I would consider two really good punt returns in the game, and obviously the kickoff return for a touchdown. And Baylor yards per pass, 7.0. You mentioned Sawyer not being too efficient. They took a lot of shots downfield, and they tested those cornerbacks, and I was surprised they tested them as much as they did. I don't know what that means going forward. Maybe that was a game plan thing, but that did hurt the percentage of completed passes. 11 of 21 is not going to get it done a lot of times, but they did. They tried to go vertical. The pass to Ashton Hawkins that he got a hand on but didn't catch, he might have scored on that play, and it would have completely changed the complexion of the game late. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, 166 yards rushing when 2-3 weeks ago, even against Colorado, I would have been very happy going into the game thinking 166 yards after the Utah game, after the Tarleton game. And I think it kind of shows the evolution of Bryson Washington come back, Dominic Richardson being back, but also the quarterback run and what we're seeing from that. So I think overall enough to be encouraged about the offense, but it has to take another step forward. It's not the reason in my mind that they lost this game. I don't think there's one area you can point to say this is the reason Baylor lost, other than Colorado just absolutely crushed it at the end of the game with obviously the Hail Mary to LaJohntay Wester. So any other final thoughts on the offense in general before we move on to a couple other things?
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed in the fact that Michael Trigg and Ashton Hawkins just were not focal points of the offense in this game. And I know that it's going to be a revolving door, but I just feel like you go look at the strength of Colorado, and it truly is those cornerbacks. And Baylor tested them, especially McKinney, and Baylor won quite a few times against him. But I also think there were opportunities in my eyes to maybe just kind of give Sawyer more layups with those easy throws, those 5-yard throws, those quick throws to Michael Trigg and to Ashton Hawkins. They just weren't there, and they didn't really attempt them very much either. And so that was something that was a little disappointing, because I did feel like they would play well. Monterey played pretty well, obviously had the great touchdown grab. Yeah. But I think in general, the slot guys, I was hoping for a little bit more from, the passing game to that slot kind of area across the middle of the field and just in shorter yardage situations.
Yeah, I think that some of this that we're seeing now, I'm really curious to see how it moves forward with this team. If that was a matchup situation, Colorado took something away, Baylor went in a different direction. You want to scheme some of that stuff, but we don't truly know. And for me personally, I haven't gone back and watched the film yet as the point of recording this. And so I'm curious to go back and see what exactly Colorado did to take away that, because I think we're both on the same page. Ashton Hawkins and Michael Trigg have been focal points for Baylor's offense till this point, and they weren't at all in this particular game. There's a couple of times that they got some forced throws to him, but it just didn't result in much at all. So let's flip to the other side of the ball. And I want to come back to special teams, and we will do that because it was such a big part of this game. But what we learned about this defense particularly is that they can rush the passer. And I know Colorado struggles, but we made a big deal about this going into this game, was that we felt that Baylor would be able to take advantage. We hadn't seen it yet because they haven't had it, and they absolutely showed that they can rush the passer. And truthfully, they ended up, Baylor ended up with 8 sacks in this game, 12 tackles for loss, and they could have had something like 12 sacks, 13 sacks in this game. They were in the backfield constantly, and obviously you hate seeing Garmin Randolph go down in this game with an injury. It looked like maybe hopefully potentially just like an ankle sprain. Obviously a big portion of that pass rush, but in general, everybody was getting pressure. And I think that's what makes this game more frustrating, is that that is what they had to do defensively. You kind of put your secondary in great positions to get turnovers and force turnovers. They didn't get any turnovers, which was disappointing, but they rushed Shedeur Sanders and they made it hard on him. And dude, give credit to him. I mean, he made the plays when he had to make the plays, but it wasn't for a lack of hitting him and pushing him to the brink. And he just made the plays at the end of the game. But overall, I think you had to come away from this game realizing Baylor's going to rush the passer, and those quarterbacks that they're going up against are going to have to make plays like Sanders did to be able to win games against Baylor, particularly on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. And I mean, 16 hurries, like you said, I guess it ended up being 8 sacks, 12 for loss. They were extremely, extremely active. And I love seeing that. The problem is like, you see these numbers and like watching the game, they were clearly having their way, with the Colorado offensive line. But it just is like the moments that stand out the most to you are the ones where guys have Shedeur just done. Just like it's an absolute sack. There's like 3 guys around him and somehow just not bringing him to the ground. And it really hurt Baylor multiple times in this game. And in particular, the one drive that you mentioned that I just feel like has to be talked about is that Amarian Miller touchdown where he gets hit and, stays on his feet miraculously, and Caden Jenkins gets blocked in the back and he goes and scores a touchdown. That play right there should not have happened, because on 2nd and 11, Steve Linton and pretty much the entire Baylor defensive line had Shedeur sacked. We're unable to. He runs out, gets first down. Then on 3rd and 3, on that touchdown play, Steve Linton once again has his big old hand on him.
Yeah.
Can't bring him down. He gets outside, makes a phenomenal play. And I think that is the frustrating part. You watch those plays, it's frustrating. You see kind of the full path of the game, the 8 sacks. Perfect. Check. Is Baylor going to stop the run in this game? Because we said we thought they were. Well, they absolutely did. I mean, 91 yards rushing. I mean, a lot of that is sack yards, but they were phenomenal against the run. And then against the pass, I know everyone's going to look and say, 341 pass yards for Shedeur Sanders. Well, okay, he had a, 50-yard one on the Hail Mary, and in overtime had a few other throws. Like, you get rid of those, he's under 300 yards passing, which was the other thing that we said kind of going into this game. They pretty much did everything. They did everything that they could. They did not force the turnover, which I do feel like played a role in them not winning this game. Yeah. And I mean, the other part of it is I think Baylor had like 6 or 7 pass breakups, in which, a lot of times you have that many pass breakups. There's usually one that's bound to be tipped and picked off, or it means you're in position to make plays very often. Just didn't happen. And so, that's the thing. It's like, wow, they did everything they could to win this game, and somehow it still wasn't enough.
Yeah. And I think I haven't given myself much chance to think about this game, but I think that's ultimately the most frustrating part of this game was you start checking the boxes and you eliminate the missed tackles. And I think, and I want to keep going back to this, you have to give Sanders so much credit, because like if you start taking that credit away, then you're expecting every single quarterback you face to do the same thing that Sanders did. Maybe they end up doing that, but what Baylor's front 7 did in the pass rush automatically becomes a game planning issue for any opposing offenses. What they put on tape, what Dave Aranda put on tape, you can be frustrated with a lot of things, but they did what they had to do. They just did not get the win, and that's the most frustrating part. But ultimately, if you're not winning games, 1 possession losses, overtime losses, that's what this is all about. And Baylor's not winning those right now. And I'm getting down a rabbit hole now. But ultimately, you have to figure out how to finish these games out. And those plays, that particular play, when you haven't been winning games, it can be overlooked if you're, a bowl team last year, still looking forward to the future. You can kind of say, man, that just tip of a hat to that opponent. But these things are just piling up more and more. So, but I think that what we know about this defense is that it's going to be physical. It's going to be fast. You're going to have an all-world effort to beat this particular team in the pass game if you want to do it that way. I don't know what the rest of the Big 12 season holds for this particular defense, but I just feel like overall there's not a lot of teams that can replicate what Shedeur Sanders did because of him specifically against this Baylor defense. Not they're going to roll out the same game plan, but you feel pretty confident about this defense rushing the passer, moving forward, and stopping the run when they need to. Not that Colorado's a great rushing team, but they did commit to it a lot more than they had the rest of the season against Baylor this week.
Yeah, as long as Shedeur Sanders stays healthy, Colorado's going to give a lot of teams fits. Now he's going to have to stay healthy because what they're doing to him is pretty unforgivable. I mean, the way he's getting hit, the way he's having to run around, it's also partly on Shedeur because he's trying to make the plays, but as a quarterback, you got to try to make the plays. And he was so effective when he's running away from guys, running towards the sideline, making those throws. It's, he's not Caleb Williams, but it reminds me of Caleb Williams when he was playing at USC and at Oklahoma, where he's just run all over the place and then just keeping his eyes downfield, trying to make these plays, and has great receivers. So yeah, all the credit in the world. Shedeur he really did have a incredible performance given how much pressure he was under. That was insane. Now for Baylor, I want to just go through a couple of my notes from this game. Matt Jones, Keaton Thomas, go ahead and make this official. I think this is the best linebacker duo they've had since 2021. I do believe that. I think they're playing great right now.
Let me add this right now. Like as a pass rushers of duos chasing down the run, like I love Terrell Bernard and Dylan Doyle. I think the athletic ability combination wise between these two is better. Athletic ability. There's a lot of other factors that go in this, but the duo, particularly overall athletic ability, is on a different level. And I love Terrell Bernard and Dylan Doyle, but you look at Keaton Thomas' athletic ability, Matt Jones, we know what he can do. Those guys just make a lot of plays. And not that the football savviness is there all the way around, but I really like those two. Go ahead on both of them.
They remind me of that duo in a lot of ways. Keaton Thomas more athletic than Bernard, doesn't process to the same level. I mean, Bernard he's a Pro Bowl type guy in the NFL. So the processing will get there for Keaton. But right now, he's just a great athlete. But he's also shown a feel, especially in this game, for pass rushing, which was great seeing. Then Matt Jones, veteran, savvy guy, very much in that Dylan Doyle type build, and very athletic, really good playmaker, has played a lot of football. I think that's really key. And also, I love what Carl Williams played good in this game, but there isn't a Jalen Petrie next to them either, which obviously adds just a whole nother dynamic to what the 2021 team could do. My next note on this, Steve Linton is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, holy cow. And we've talked about him a lot, the athletic ability, like seeing him chasing guys down the field and basically outrunning running backs is phenomenal. But in this game, you finally got to see why Baylor wanted him so bad. His pass rushing, he was unblockable, completely unblockable. He wrecked Colorado's game plan. And I mean, this guy could have had 5 sacks in this game pretty easily. He was all over Shedeur. He played awesome. Great to see. I think, Garmin only playing 38 snaps. That hurts some things. You're forcing a lot more on Steve's plate. You're forcing a lot more on, guys like Kyler Jordan and other guys because you don't have Garmin out there, which was kind of tough. No Cooper Lands in this game, which opened up a door for an interesting name that I feel like I need to bring up here because this was the perfect matchup, right? We've seen these first 3 weeks where it's these teams run the football. They all run the football. Are we going to see some differences when they play more of a spread it out, throw it type football team? And Kyle Roberts-Day comes in and plays 21 snaps, has a sack and a tackle for loss, and his sack came at a crucial time in the game as Baylor got that 4th down stop at the beginning of the 4th quarter, or early on in the 4th quarter. I think there was 9 minutes left, but he was a pleasant surprise and a guy that hasn't played much, but you knew in these matchups, especially with the injuries that Baylor faced, they were going to need someone who could actually pass rush from that interior line position. And that's what he gave them. I was very impressed by the way that he played. I felt like he had a nice performance, and those were just a few of the shout outs I wanted to mention. The secondary had struggles. I feel like they had some good moments, but they did have they took their lumps at times in this game, and that's going to, I think, get better as they get more reps. They just haven't been tested very much this year. And then you're thrown it to the wolves, against a team that has great receivers and a great quarterback, and you're going to give up some plays.
Yeah, with that particular game plan of you're playing into Shedeur's hands in a lot of ways because he wants to get the ball downfield. He's going to make plays downfield. You're just saying, okay, our defensive front is going to get the sack before he can release the ball. Well, then the secondary's in a bind if the defensive front doesn't get there. A lot of times they're flushing him and moving him. A lot of times he had throwaways, but the secondary is just chasing guys over. One guy that I wanted to mention in this that was in the secondary and has been really good this season, you might think kind of sneaky good, or I would call him sneaky good, but is Corey Gordon. He has shown up in truly the first 4 games a lot of times, and he doesn't have the great stats, but he's physical. And as a guy that we didn't expect a ton from, he's kind of developed as a nice backup option in the safety position. So you mentioned a few guys that I would have mentioned as well. I wanted to throw Corey in there as well. But yeah, overall, I mean, you hated to see Garmin go down. You hope that it didn't look like it's going to be something he gets over quickly. You just hopefully he can get back pretty soon. You have some depth at the position, but you just hope he can get back pretty soon because he's become a force in the pass rushing along with Steve Linton. But fortunately, go ahead.
Yeah, he definitely has. I would also say that, Jaquez Evans, I think, is getting healthier. He played a lot better. Like, he did not look great against Air Force. I truly think it was one of those things where he's just trying to work himself back into game shape and work himself back into, how he was going to play before he got hurt. And he played pretty good in this game. I think he's going to be pretty impactful, especially while Garmin is out. So yeah, that's definitely a key. I think for me, I think, this game, I feel like this game is just going to be one where we all just sit back and go, man, Baylor let this go and Baylor lost this game and now overreactions. They're not going to make a bowl game. This team is going to struggle the rest of the way. And it's just like, man, I look around the Big 12 and Baylor does a great job stopping the run. Baylor plays really physical defense. Baylor's moved the football, better than a few other teams in the Big 12. And their defense has, I would say, arguably been probably, what would you say, a top 4 defense in the Big 12 probably at the start of the year?
Top 5? I think so. I think the secondary is still kind of the question marks, but I think that some of those questions were answered other than the fact that Shedeur Sanders is just really good and those receivers are really good. If they're rushing the passer like this and teams aren't getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands, then they're gonna have sacks. I mean, I don't know how many sacks they're gonna have. Ultimately, no one's gonna play the way Colorado did, particularly in this game. Texas Tech's gonna get the ball out of their hands a lot quicker. BYU's not gonna give those opportunities. The strengths are gonna have to match up. Baylor's gonna have to be a good tackling team that they haven't necessarily shown in these obviously against secondary wise, they've been fine. I would say they've got to tackle better in the front 7. But I think Shedeur Sanders, you have to give him credit. I know I keep saying that, but he was just on another planet. The way that he played, he had he made a lot of really difficult plays look really easy in that game while also getting beat the heck up. And so I'm curious to see how other teams react to what Baylor's done. But I think overall, a long way of saying, yeah, I think this defense right now is a top 4 defense in the league. They got to start forcing turnovers, and it can climb higher than that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so just kind of my mindset of that is if you got a top 4 defense, then I think it truly is just going to come down, can you hold serve at home? I think that's really it. Because I think what I've seen in the Big 12 this year is, even the teams like Texas Tech who have struggled this year, they still played well at home. And they opened conference play with they only ended up winning by 8 against Arizona State, but they were up the whole game. They were in control for the most part the whole way. You look at what BYU did to Kansas State. Like, Baylor's got to hold serve at home. They have to find a way to win games at home, get the crowd excited so that they can make the environment really, really friendly the rest of this year. Because frankly, you look at their home schedule, every one of those games is winnable. I mean, TCU just gave up 66 to SMU. Kansas is 1-3, looking like they could be a team that just trails off towards the end of the year. Oklahoma State is fine. I don't think they're great. They're fine. They're going to be solid with Gundy, but very winnable game. And then the BYU game that we're going to talk about, on tomorrow's show, also very winnable. I mean, when they go on the road, they're very beatable. And so I think it's just an interesting dilemma as kind of looking at just Baylor instead of looking also at the rest of their schedule and the rest of the Big 12 and seeing the other struggles that have occurred and think to yourself, well, Baylor can probably get out of this still with a bowl, making a bowl game, even with this loss that really should have been a win.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that things have to fall into place. You have to win close games. You have to win 1-possession games. But what they didn't do last year was take advantage of 8 home games. This year they have 6 home games. Currently they are 2-0 at home. You got 4 more home games. if you're worse than 3-1 in those home games, you're going to struggle to make a bowl. But go ahead and be undefeated, and you got it. So I'm with you. Before we wrap this show up, I do want to touch on special teams. Everybody's going to point to the Isaiah Hankins missed field goal. That was the last line of defense of that game not being a loss. If he makes that field goal, which he's been very reliable this season, if he makes that field goal, the Hail Mary means nothing. And that's a difficult pill to swallow. I know he's torn up about it. But overall, special teams, I don't personally remember a better return game for punt return and kickoff return than Baylor had. I mean, once Jamal Bell, who was brought in to specifically do that, return that kick, and I know that Colorado's kicker got hurt, but they didn't want to kick it deep anymore. And then I don't know why you ever punt to Josh Cameron anymore. Like, he makes the first guy miss, and then he's just like, he's not like this uber fast guy, but he just has a knack for returning punts. So kudos, shout out to that entire special teams unit. They've been solid. Obviously, Palmer Williams continues to be solid. He had a little, I wouldn't call it a shank early in the game, but he had one that was below his average. But overall, man, like, if you want to win close games, you want to find the hidden yardage, Baylor has shown the ability this season to do that.
Yeah, they've had moments. I mean, you remember the Cincinnati game last year. I think Josh had a really good punt return, and then they actually scored a defensive touchdown on a kickoff return, the fumble, and then Bryce, who was it? Byron Vaughns, I think, picked it up and scored. So that was one. Richard Reese, of course, against West Virginia last year. That game was completely crazy. But yeah, I think in general, Baylor special teams have been really awesome this year. I would say on that last drive, they didn't do Isaiah Hankins any favors. I mean, you might as well have. I mean, they just lost 2 yards, and they'd gained 2 yards on the first play, and then they lost 5 yards and set it back when really you're just hoping like, hey, let's get him a 39-yard field goal. Yeah, squared up, 39-yard field goal.
When they had they nearly get Shador for a safety. He got outside of the tackle box. Otherwise, it would have been a safety. It would have been a penalty, intentional grounding for a safety. But then Josh Cameron catches it at like the 50, and you're thinking, all right, man, they're like almost in field goal range here. And special teams set that up, and then the offense hurt them because I literally said it out loud. I said, run the ball up the middle 3 times and kick a field goal. Like, you might break one, but leave the field goal there. And then they ran the option or the zone read. Sawyer keeps it and loses the yards that they gained on first down minus 2 more yards. And I'm just like that. I had a knot in my stomach at that point of the game because I was thinking, man, like that in him making that field goal mentally, is this a 39-yard field goal or 38-yard field goal, maybe even shorter than that rather than whatever it ended up being. I don't remember what it was. And I hate that for Isaiah. 45. And I hate that for Isaiah because he's been good this year.
He really has. Yeah, he really has. I did want to mention just really quick, Nevada transfer Jamal Bell. I hope I'm right on this because I remember when I was going through his recruitment, he obviously has the Nevada record for kickoff return yards, but I don't think he ever returned one for a touchdown. I think this is his first one. So congrats to him. 100 more yards added to his total. He's had a fantastic career as a returner. I know he hasn't done a ton as a receiver yet for Baylor this year, but in the return game, I mean, that is super valuable to have a guy like that. So really happy for him to really come out and make a big impact and a big splash play that was also blocked really well set up by the Baylor blockers. And then Jamal did the rest with his speed. So that was a lot of fun. The special teams continues to be good. Obviously would have loved the last kick to go in because Baylor probably wins the game if it does. But at the end of the day, I think special teams did more than enough to contribute to Baylor winning this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things that resulted or forced that loss rather than special teams. And that was going to be the thing at the end of the game that everybody pointed to. But, I mean, you can't put that on Isaiah other than he missed the kick. There's a lot of other things that could have been fixed to avoid the loss. But all right, Baylor family, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. As always, thanks to each of you for listening. For Grayson Grunhaver, I'm Colt Barber. Have a great Monday and sick 'em Bears.